So in a pool of underwhelming and outclassed Titan exotics, this episode we'll be looking at the Insurmountable Skullfort. A vanilla exotic from the launch of the game, the Skullfort had a minor addition at the launch of the Taken King, where instead of only giving you the Striker Titan's transfusion perk for free and spawn with full melee energy, now you can also have 2 melee charges with this exotic. Once hailed as the optimal exotic for certain bosses in the Taken King, most namely the Golgoroth fight, as you could easily have 2 melting point charges for maximum damage, now the Skullfort struggles to keep up with other Titan exotics across all aspects of the game. The recently released Thagomizers essentially perform as an upgraded version of the Skullfort, but I'll get into that later. As always, let's look at the perks of the Skullfort and try to make sense of a suitable loadout. I should point out straight away that the perks you could typically re-roll in other helmets, like on the Skyburner's Annex, are locked on the Skullfort. That is to say that you cannot re-roll the ideal perks like Inverse Shadow and Infusion. Instead, you'll have to settle for Hands-On and Invigoration. While these perks aren't great, they do at least play into the exotic's unique perk. Skullfort is a melee-based exotic, so the Hands-On perk, granting increased super from melee kills, and Invigoration, granting increased cooldown for your melee charge from orbs, both coincide with punching things. The reason you should consider re-rolling this helm is for a disciplined strength build, or to either get second thoughts or heavy lifting, if Hands-On really isn't working for you. Alright, let's analyse the exotic perks. You get Transfusion for free, you get 2 melee charges, and you spawn with full melee energy. While this is a class-specific exotic, you don't need to play as a Striker to get some benefits from the Skullfort. Still, I would recommend a loadout with the Striker subclass. Just quickly looking at the Sunbreaker class, yeah, you can have 2 melting points, which is great, particularly stacked with Simmering Flames, but it does require you to hang on to your super. It might be worthwhile using during some strike bosses, but actually using your hammers or sun charge would be a better overall choice. So Sunbreaker is not a bad subclass for this exotic, but not the best. Defenders would be pretty underwhelming with Skullfort too, as 2 Force Barrier melees aren't really amazing, and there's much better options like no backup plans for melee based builds. Okay, so let's proceed with the Striker subclass. The ability to respawn with full melee energy is always useful to have, even if it doesn't really get used. In both PvP and PvE, it can be very valuable. For the Striker, you have a choice between using either Overload, which has a faster melee cooldown and has a chance to instantly cool down your melee on a hit, or you could use Discharge, which has the potential to kill multiple enemies in a single hit, but I feel like this perk is only worthwhile if coupled with another melee perk. Finally, there is Amplify, probably the best melee choice here. The amount of super energy you get back per kill is excellent, and when you can have 2 of these charges, the usefulness skyrockets. As for the other skill trees, since Transfusion is already enabled, you can use either Aftershocks or Headstrong. If you like to use Aftermath for your Fist of Havoc, then go with Aftershocks, but I personally like the additional range and damage that Shockwave provides, so I'd go with Headstrong for the increased sprint speed primarily. Other perks are fairly optional. Starting with Overload, having a faster melee cooldown is great, but that's all you really get. It doesn't really feel very advantageous or beneficial to punch things without any reward. You'll definitely want to max out your strength to have the fastest cooldown possible, but if you're running with Skullfort, don't bother with Overload. It's just not worth the effort when you actually get into situations where you can hit multiple enemies with a single punch. Amplify is ultimately the best choice here, and for good reason. It gives you a ton of free super energy. I had the most success using Skullfort and Amplify, with Monte Carlo to quickly recharge my melee, or even the Raid Fusion Rifle, as the 2-for-1 perk gives you a chunk of melee energy back per kill. This would be the most optimal way to use the Skullfort in my opinion. But if you want to be even more efficient, scrap the Skullfort and just go with the Thagomizers. Skullfort is honestly the poor man's Thagomizers, because those exotic gloves do what the Skullfort does, only far better. With the Thagomizers, you can stack the intrinsic Amplify perk with Overload or Discharge, suddenly making both choices far more worthwhile. Just from some of the footage you've seen, I'm able to fully recharge my super with a single Discharge punch, or go on a punching spree and topping up my super, with the now manually selected Transfusion perk continuously restoring my health. That is, of course, only if you have the Thagomizers. If Skullfort is all you've got, you can still make it work with Amplify and the Monte Carlo or the Raid Fusion Rifle, just not at the same potential as the Thagomizers. I hope I was able to provide you with some information you may have not have previously known. If you like this sort of content, feel free to subscribe. I'll try to keep making these episodes every other day. Thanks for watching, catch you guys later.